Welcome to Keith and I Don't Tread on Anyone. Today I want to make the case that Antifa is a communist organization, not an anarchist organization, for the same reason that Ted Bundy calling himself peaceful doesn't make him peaceful. Antifa calling themselves anarchist does not necessarily mean they are anarchist. So to be an anarchist only means that you believe that aggression is not justified and that states necessarily employ aggression, and therefore that states and the aggression they necessarily employ are unjustified. Accordingly, anyone who is not an anarchist must maintain either A, aggression is justified, or B, states, in particular minimal states, do not necessarily employ aggression. This is what the anarchist inherently opposes. Not schools, not roads, or any of the other endeavors the state might be involved in. Those are all arbitrary aspects of what inherently makes the state a unique institution. It has the right to initiate laws that no one else would have the right to do. Anarchy, from the Greek prefix an, meaning without or the absence of, and the Greek noun archon, meaning master or ruler. Anarchy does not mean without rules, it literally means without rulers, without masters. Herein lies the principled difference between me saying you don't have the right to drink alcohol at my house for whatever reason. It's my property. These are terms that I like to have for people I interact with on my property. And me saying you don't have the right to drink alcohol on your property. One is unjustified prohibition of another person engaging in a peaceful action. The other is me making whatever rules I feel are justified with regard to how I voluntarily interact or contract with other people. It's the reason it's okay for my job to say, if we catch you on drugs, we fire you. Then I don't engage in that voluntary exchange. When the state says we own the bodies of all human beings, anyone caught engaging in drug use will be put in a cage and shot if they resist, that is an example of rulership or claiming ownership over the body of another person who has not voluntarily contracted with you. Aggression. The libertarian creed rests upon one central axiom that no man or group of men may aggress against the person or property of anyone else. This may be called the non-aggression axiom. Aggression is defined as the initiation of the use or threat of physical violence against the person or property of anyone else. Aggression is therefore synonymous with invasion. The founder of the large part of the modern anarchist movement, Murray Rothbard, said, "I define an anarchist society as one where there is no legal possibility for coercive aggression against the person or property of any individual." So it doesn't mean no one will ever be violent. It means there is no institutionalized recognition that this group called Congress has more rights than anyone else. War is still mass murder, even if you call it that. It's still theft, even if you call it taxation, and there's a W-4. It's still enslavement when you force someone to engage in labor against their will under the guise of conscription. Anarchism is essentially about equality on one hand and freedom on the other. Everyone has the right to be free and do whatever they please so long as they don't initiate fraud or aggression, both of which constitute a violation of individual consent. So that's what an anarchist is. Now, a communist, according to the Communist Manifesto in 1848 by Karl Marx, in this sense, the theory of the communists may be summed up in a single sentence: abolition of private property. So whereas the anarchist, the libertarian anarchist, individualist anarchist, says that it is immoral to initiate aggression against peaceful people and their property, which is simply an extension of who they are. I didn't initiate aggression against you. I just burned your house down. Yeah, that's me because it's my stuff. With regard to others, I have a better claim to it, assuming I acquired it through voluntary exchange or original appropriation. That is the only consistent anarchist, no rulers, freedom mindset. Here, we have, in the sense, the theory of the communists may be summed up in a single sentence. This is the founder of communism: abolition of private property. Now, so when you see Antifa rioting, looting, and setting the property of other people on fire, does that align with the non-aggression principle or the non-recognition of private property principle? Well, of course, they are communists who pretend to believe in freedom to attract people, and then they engage in communist activities. This is exactly what you would expect from a communist who doesn't recognize the legitimacy of private property. So if someone calls themselves peaceful but engages in violence, we know that that's actually who they are. If a man says, I respect women, and it turns out he's a rapist, like this Harvey Weinstein, Jeffrey Epstein level rapist who, commits mass atrocities, well, then we obviously know that I'm so kind and respectful is a fake front to cover up their immoral activities. All of Antifa's actions are completely consistent with the immoral communist philosophy, abolition of private property. There is nothing they do that is anarchic or without rulers or abides by the non-aggression principle. I mean, even the idea that they are for the working class and they believe that the downtrodden need to gain institutional power within society, they absolutely mistreat cities that are disproportionately middle class. It's not like they do it to the Hamptons, which they wouldn't have a right to anyways. So again, we do not see anything that Antifa does, and it's not really shocking when you ask all of them, and they're mostly Bernie supporters, who say, well, yeah, ideally we'd have a stateless society, but in the interim we should have a Federal Reserve, minimum wage laws, government, education, and the EPA and the FDA and the Department of Agriculture, just to keep other bad people in check. We need to grow the state. That is completely consistent with communism and statism. So, in other words, what makes government illegitimate is this. The illegitimacy of the state rests on the fact that it exercises control over resources that its agents never acquired through original appropriation or voluntary exchange, and it does so without the consent of the rightful owners of said resources. Again, it's the difference between me making a rule for my house and me telling millions of strangers who have not contracted with me how they have to do things in their house, or I'll cage them and shoot them if they resist. So here we actually have a principal difference between anarchists and statists, whereas the state initiates aggression against peaceful people and communists initiate aggression against peaceful people. That's what makes them mad. So, that's what makes them unique, rather. Socialism is the institutionalized interference with or aggression against private property and private property claims. So when A and B want to make an exchange, and C comes along and coercively interferes and says, unless this exchange meets A, B, and C criteria, let's say the minimum wage, then I am going to forcibly stop you two from engaging in this peaceful, voluntary, mutually beneficial interaction. That is a master. That is someone claiming to have ownership over the bodies of other human beings who are engaged in peaceful activity. So it's no surprise at all that National Socialism, Communism, and Antifa all hate individualism, even though they claim to be for minorities. They hate free speech because, for the same reason they want to regulate business, they want to regulate speech. Only, they just want to regulate it for the greater good. It's code for violently dominating. Hate free markets. Of course, they hate voluntary exchange. That makes people mutually better off. They hate elections. Well, that's another story. And they blatantly approve of violence. So when every ANCOM that I've ever met supports drastically growing the state, even though they say, well, this is just to usher in a dictatorship of the proletariat. Eventually, obviously, we're going to have a stateless society because the state only exists to assist class struggles. It makes perfect sense once you understand that communists are bad because they initiate violence against peaceful people. Fascists are bad because they initiate aggression against peaceful people. Slave owners, same thing. A minarchist state, same exact thing. So we have a large amount of literature. This is not just me saying, I'm going to pick the good things I like from anarchy and the bad things I don't like about communism, and then pin all that on the Antifa members. As I showed you earlier, I have the founding document, the Communist Manifesto, that perfectly illustrates what Antifa participates in and advocates, even though it's under the guise of anarchy. Here are a number of books by sound anarchist consistent thinking authors. For a New Liberty by Murray Rothbard, Anatomy of the State by Murray Rothbard, Chaos Theory, Defending the Undefendable, The Problem of Political Authority, The Most Dangerous Superstition, Private Governance, A Theory of Socialism and Capitalism, Against the State, No Treason. We have about 150 years of literature that really develops a foundation for what an anarchist really is. So, in short, this is an anarchist. This is either a government shill or an idiot. It is important to remember that Cointelpro was a series of covert and illegal projects conducted by the United States Federal Bureau of Investigation aimed at surveilling, infiltrating, discrediting, and disrupting American political organizations. So I don't think it's enough to say, this organization is bad because of these people that are involved in it. Certainly, if a bunch of so-called libertarians engaged in immoral activity, I wouldn't give up the philosophy. The reason the philosophy is immoral is because when you get at the heart of it, it is the abolition of private property, which means some other group has the right to initiate aggression against a peaceful, voluntary exchange between two other individuals. Therefore, Antifa represents the philosophy of communism and in virtually no way represents the philosophy of the non-aggression principle, anarchism, freedom, or libertarianism. Thank you for watching. Keith and I don't tread on anyone.